Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today I am super excited to be doing a dedicated book review for Thrice by Andrew D. Meredith. Thrice is an adventure fantasy with all of the things that we love about that subgenre. I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of what this book is about, a brief synopsis of the beginning, and then I will give you my full non-spoiler review of the world, the plot, the characters, and the writing style. The first protagonist we meet in this story is Joven, a gruff warrior who's been tasked with watching over a little boy named Leaf. We are introduced to Joven in the middle of a brawl in the first chapter of this book. He's immediately a very gruff, very kind of doesn't play well with others character, which is always one that I enjoy reading. He is then softened by the second protagonist that we are introduced to, and that is Leaf, who is a little boy with magical abilities that are far beyond anything anyone at that age should be able to handle. Now, Leaf is being kind of secreted away because obviously with the kind of power that Leaf holds, there are people in this world that would love to get their hands on him, and Joven's entire purpose at this point is to keep Leaf safe. He is Leaf's adopted father, and that is the relationship that we are introduced to between the two of them, and it is truly a beautiful thing. And this is a place where I think that Andrew Meredith's own experience as a father really shines through, because my favorite part of this book is the fact that Leaf and Joven have this beautiful, wholesome relationship in the middle of all of this fantasy, adventure, and peril. Being a parent myself, I absolutely loved the authentic interactions between the two of them, and that, for me, was a huge highlight of this book. When Joven becomes aware of a threat to Leaf's safety and the fact that there are people in this world who are actively pursuing Leaf and trying to get their hands on him, instead of disappearing, Joven decides to go straight for the bear's den and discover the truth behind who is after them and why. Along the road, as you might imagine, we pick up a few motley crew side characters that join Joven and Leaf or try to inhibit his passage through the story. We get some very distinct characters that cross Joven and Leaf's path, and I very much enjoyed seeing the interactions between Joven and these characters contrasting with Leaf's interactions with these characters, because Joven is this kind of battle-hardened, grizzled warrior who has a little bit more of a cynical outlook on life, whereas we've got Leaf, who is this very pure, very innocent young boy who is just out for the adventure. As we get through the book, things get more and more intense, and this is where I think I'm going to segue into talking about Andrew Meredith's writing style and choices in this book. The way that this book is written feels very episodic. I read a blog post that Andrew wrote on his website where he talks about Netflix episode pacing, and I can definitely see where he chose to use that as a format influence in this book. It feels like an old fairy tale adventure story. It reads very episodic, which lends itself beautifully to how accessible and quickly this book reads. I think in this case, especially where we have a younger protagonist involved, that the episodic nature of this book works very, very well. I really enjoyed it as an adult fantasy reader, kind of as a quick, accessible read in between larger fantasy books. It is also something that I would love to read with my 10-year-old son. I think it lends itself very well to a variety of age levels, and that is something that honestly in fantasy is really difficult to do. So that is something I wanted to point out in this review, because I think it's something that Andrew pulls off really well. Because the plot is packaged so neatly into these episodic chapters, it is very easy to keep flipping through them and not realize how far you've actually gotten through the book. When I talk about the world building of this book, the first thing I have to mention is Andrew's obvious influences from Slavic folklore and his decision to really explore the use of different fairy tale and mythical creatures. They were creatures that felt very fresh and new, because Slavic folklore is not something that I see a lot of in modern fantasy, and I think that's a shame actually, because these characters come up against some pretty wild critters in this book. These are creatures that lent themselves very well to a story that is partially told through the perspective of a young boy. We get that sense of mystery and excitement and fear all wrapped up into one as we're introduced to these different creatures. I don't want to tell you a lot about them because honestly, part of the magic was discovering them as I went through the book. Another thing I really loved about this book was the variety of environments. For how short this book is, Andrew did a really good job utilizing every environment that he had. I have kind of touched on writing style a little bit in the way that Andrew uses episodic storytelling for this book. I do think that he is a very accessible writer, especially in a story like this. He's very easy to read. He is very straightforward with the information we're given in this book. This book really feels like the kind of book that you'd want to sit down next to a roaring fireplace with your cup of hot tea or hot chocolate and just read a fantasy adventure. And I got that atmosphere from the book the entire time I was reading it. I'm so excited to introduce this book to my son, who is 10, and let him experience it as well, because I think that he's going to enjoy it as much as I did. I do have a written Goodreads review for this book. Please check it out in the description box below. I will also link the book in the comments below so that you can go pick up your own copy. It is available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and one of the cool things about the audiobook is that Andrew actually narrated it himself, which I think is really cool, because when you have an author who has the talent to be able to narrate their own book and pull it off, it adds such a cool nuance to the story because it's being told by the person who wrote it and knows these characters better than anyone else. The other thing that I want to point you to is to Andrew's upcoming epic fantasy novel, the first book in the Collation saga, Deathless Beast. It is a completely different flavor from Thrice, from what I've been told, and I'm very excited to read that as well. And if you're interested in checking out my interview with Andrew Meredith, click also the link in the description box below. Andrew and I had a lovely chat about his upcoming book, Deathless Beast. We also talked about his love and influence of Slavic folklore and some things about Thrice specifically. Definitely go check out that interview if you're interested in hearing more about Thrice from the author himself. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for this book review. I hope that you are having a great week. I hope that you are all having 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.